My name is Sicc. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I got my name from my cousin from Ohio, Akron, Ohio, Sir Joe Cooper. Is my first cousin. That's my Uncle Bean's first son. And in our youth, when I was about 13, 12-ish, I think I want to say maybe a little younger, my cousin was like 17, 18, and he was a stone goon, coming from up north. And he just was brought up on some different ways of living. And when he came down to Texas, he terrorized it. He terrorized it, and we was just some little niggas that was really about it. Like, we went through a lot. We done did some shit, and he gave me the name Lil Sicc, like sick, and he was sick and I was Lil Sicc, so it was like my older brother kind of, you know what I'm saying? And it just kind of stuck with me. I didn't use it for a long time until later on when I got put out of school in Dallas, and I got sent to like in between Lexington and Giddings, Texas, in Lee County, Texas. And then at that point, it was a whole different way of life. Like, it wasn't no more running around with a strap and, trying to get a few dollars. It was you down here, and the closest store to you is 10 minutes, 15 minutes, It was just a whole different situation. So, Dallas, Texas, I was born at Parkland Memorial, and grew up in South Oak Cliff for a little while, and then I lived with my daddy for a second, like a quick second, out in Pleasant Grove off of St. Augustine, and then I went to school in Richardson. I went to elementary school in Richardson at Spring Valley Elementary.
Let's talk about the mom and dad waking up, having to find money and getting out the dirt, the CDs, the magazines and stuff like that.
Okay. Mom and dad was never together, so it was never like a family-oriented situation where I could ever really see any type of structure or a family. But my mom was a stone hustler. Daddy was a hustler, but it was distant my whole life until he died. We didn't really know each other, but we knew each other. Like, we got to spend some time with each other and shit. He was a hustler. He had his own little shop and shit. So he was hustling since day one. He used to be a DJ and a couple other little hustles. But he always did real good for himself. And then, my mom, she graduated from college a couple of times and stuff like that, but all of them dealt with different little substance abuses and shit, as a lot of them do. So it was just a hard situation, just always wanting that love as a kid and never got that shit, so I just quit trying. And it just became to the point to where my mom and dad was like any other homie that might be around or might not. And then that's when it was like that ruthless stage in life where it was just like anything goes. Ain't no rules and ain't never gonna be none. It's all about how I see it, and that's how it's gonna turn out. So at first, that was the person I had built myself to not be the person that was hurt all the time for so many different reasons, you know what I'm saying? On the fact of that, I grew up most of my life alone. Because when I got kicked out of them schools, it was like 12, 13 or something like that. It was like I was back down in the country now, but in a house down there by myself, because my grandpa still lived in Oak Cliff in South Dallas. And so, that whole situation is just what it was, and it wasn't really no more than that. You know what I mean? Like, all my inspiration came from people and creative people that I would unite with along the way in life. You know what I mean? So it's like one of my closest friends was Casey Walters, and of course Abel Laura in the elementary in the country. So like, they was just different than me. You know what I mean? So it was a different type of people to know, and I respected them for what they was and shit. So it was like I was always a diverse person from the get-go, just not caring what race you was, don't really care where the fuck you come from or what you didn't really been through, but it's all about how me and you build. And yeah, so that was kind of like more or less of the family oriented part of me is that was it, because it ain't been a family since, as far as like intermediate family and shit like that. So As you young, you trying to find a niche for yourself to where you could feel like, oh shit, I'm busting, I'm popping. And I used to throw parties in the pastures, young, 13, 14, 15 years old, and like hundreds of people would come. My shit was lit. And then one day, me and Casey Walters, we got on the back of one of the trucks in the house party, because we had the trucks bagged up to the house and shit, and we were barbecue. We got kegs of beers lit in this we young. But we started like rapping and shit off the dome, because it's like in Texas we rap when we say freestyle, it's completely as it comes to your mind. It's not really too much anything written or recited at all. So we started freestyling, and people would just go crazy with the reaction. You hear like 60, 70 people in the house like, oh, like when you just broke them boys off is what we used to call it. And yeah, when you break them boys off, you get the crowd reaction to where it was like, them people was like, man, y'all should make a CD. I promise on everything I love. Me and Casey made a burnt CD off of a computer at his mom's log cabin outside of Giddens, Texas. And when I was about, like 18, 17, maybe somewhere around there, man, we sold so many of those blank CDs, just burning them. Hey, man, y'all got the CD? People would be at the store and everything, just like reciting our rhymes and shit. And then that's when I knew. I was like, oh, yeah, it's these parties and this music is what's going to turn this hoe up. And that's what it was. It's like we would always throw them faithfully, and it was just building a bigger fan base to then where I found one of those kids that I went to high school and middle school and all that shit with in Lexington. His dad owned a club on 6th Street, and that's what got me to Austin. And then it was the only thing I had, so it was like it had to work. You know what I mean? Because it's like wasn't no parents. And then my grandpa, he's a stone hustler, so he's never there. So it's like we really got to get to it. And then that's when it all started. Like on the downside was down, you know what I mean? It was really down, because it's like people like me, they have all of these good traits and come from bad situations. So it's like you gotta win over yourself and just breaking your own cycle, breaking your evil shit, your evil ways, more or less, so you could be successful in certain ways, you know what I mean? I'm dealing in entertainment and helping people and shows and all these different things. You got to be able to do the business. If you can't deal with people and you can't get along with people, and you got a business that, at that time was all I had was music and shows, you know what I'm saying, and little parties, because the shows were so packed that people wanted me to help them promote their parties. That's how it came to be. So on the downside, before all of that even happened, it was like I was sleeping on floors. Like I stayed with Joey Gonzalez's people for a while when I was young. I stayed with Abel Laura's people, Lexington, Texas, for, weeks at a time, days at a time, here and there when shit got rough. And it's just like all the way up to Pilarcito and, you know what I'm saying? Like even Gutter, one of the cats that helped me like really accelerate my lyrics, you know what I mean? It was hard, you know what I mean? It was hard just knowing that you had all this ambition, you gotta look, you just, you gotta build it up, and you gotta build it up and make it before you die, or build it up and make it before you get 40 years in prison or whatever. And I went to prison, so it was like I went to prison like a celebrity because people knew me just from local fame, you know what I mean? So it was like boys was in there making sure nothing happened. Boys was in there making sure everything I needed to make money in that hoe went down. It was crazy, bro. Like that, I could make a whole movie off of my experience in prison. Shout out to all of them boys, red and blue and Thongo, because the Thongos was the reason why shit was moving, and then the red and blue boys, they was the ones completely around me in every unit. Niggas was not letting nothing happen to me just because of the simple fact of what I did in the streets. And everybody was like, you say this about Sicc, people would really fight each other and argue. Like, nah, actually Sicc is like this. Sicc did this for my little brother. Sicc put on these shows, like your experience is your experience with you. But you gotta understand, like, this nigga ain't stopped since he started, and all he been trying to do is help niggas get on. Like, I was a hustler at heart. So growing up on all these people and seeing like just not stopping is like it was key. It was motivation to not go back to sleeping on floors, to not need nothing for nobody, none of that. And it's like anybody that done did something for me, it's like I've been looking for them. I've been reaching out. I've been holding it down as I progress, because I remember them days. I answer my phone, I reply to my messages just because it's like it's gonna forever be that way. I can't cut off the motherfuckers that helped get me here, and I can't cut off the reality of the fact that I came from the absolute bottom. Wasn't no family, wasn't no friends, wasn't no help, wasn't none of that. It was all based off of like how you carried yourself was gonna get you through the next day. You know what I'm saying? So it was what it was. A lot of thugging, a lot of going to jail, and you know what I'm saying? Like just being wild, you know what I mean? But you know, it's just like when it rains, it pours. But it's like I had a bad 10 years. Like people say I had a bad day. I had a bad 10 years, bro. People kept on dying on me. Girlfriends dying. You know, my grandpa, you know, was the closest thing I had to a daddy. He died. You know, all back to back. On top of a nigga not having nothing. You know, and then it was the fact of coming from Dallas, migrating to the country, and that living outside of Austin. Ran into somebody at school who dad owned a club on 6th Street called Nuno's. Shout out to Nuno. And they gave me a shot at my own Sunday night, is where I even started the first local shows that just turned into a crazy situation. It was just out of control, packed wall to wall every time. Most of the time a nigga threw something. So, you know, that struggle part of it keeps you, it's gonna keep me motivated to death. Like, I ain't never gonna be the nigga that not gonna get up and go get it, ever, based off of, it's like, it's an addiction now because I can't never go back to being like that. I can't never go back to, and it's just all part of growth. And I'm glad it went down like that, because if I would have had a bunch of shit handed to me and then lost it and then been older, broke, it's like I'd rather go through that broke shit young and then go on and migrate and get up out of it, man, because it's like, when people say they had a bad day and it's been a bad little run, I had bad 10 years, bro. In and out of jail, you know, door kickings, nigga, the shootouts, like all kind of shit, squabbles non-stop. Your hands had to be right in Austin. Boys was gonna check your chin every time you go to the club. If you even got into the smallest altercation on Facebook, you know, anything, bro, like your chin was gonna get checked. Austin was the boxing arena. So everybody, you know, was really gunning each other down. You know, them youngsters now, the young niggas is getting it popping in Austin. But before, it was just like Catch Curtis and Catch Curtis and what's my nigga name? The boxer. What's his name, Kane? Mandingo. Catch Curtis and Mandingo in front of one of them clubs, man, and get your feelers knocked off your feet, man. Them boys was, them niggas made the city tough, man. Then them young gunners came in, all that shit changed. Everybody started getting shot. Niggas ain't boxing no more. But yeah, man, like I said, it's cold nights in prison and jail walls, and the worst part about it is a lot of the situation is mind control. That's how I learned to deal with it and overcome it. It's like I beat that shit because I did everything A1. You know what I'm saying? Never caught a case in prison and never nothing. And I wrote out all of